Hello and welcome to my channel. So nice of you to join me. The case I'm going to tell you about today is one that came to my attention because after 31 years of being a cold case, an arrest has been made. And it appears to me, while not discounting the diligence and hard work of police and prosecution investigators, this case has been solved, at least in the eyes of the grand jury, thanks to media attention. And as a humble YouTuber, it makes me happy when I find out that the kind of work that I do may actually be helpful when solving cases. The crime occurred back in April of 1991, which is probably another reason why it jumped off the page for me, because that was right at the end of my sophomore year in high school. And as the nostalgic creature I am, it's easy for me to take myself back in time mentally to this time in history. The third reason it caught my eye is because the story begins with a house fire. And as you will discover over the next few weeks, I've been spending a lot of my time researching another case, a particularly ugly one that started with a fire too. When I get into that case, it may be a 2 or 3-parter. There's just so much. But anyway, because I've been busy looking at documents and photos of another fire-related crime, when this one entered my news feed, kind of felt like I needed to take a closer look. Before we jump into the case, and you know if you've been watching me for the past couple of months what I'm about to say, I want to give you a friendly reminder that in just a few short days, I'm going to be in London at the Leonardo Royal Hotel and Spa near St. Paul's Cathedral, enjoying, for the very first time, CrimeCon UK. If you're planning on attending CrimeCon in London, you can get 10% off your admission by using code GAVIN when you buy your ticket at crimecon.co.uk. CrimeCon is a weekend that is jam-packed with exhibits, demonstrations, and speakers. Podcast Row, which is where I'll be, is full of your favorite YouTubers and podcasters. CrimeCon is the ultimate true crime weekend. It's partnered by CBS Reality, the expert-led true crime TV channel. Please join me there. And again, use code GAVIN for 10% off your ticket. And if you're a patron of mine, you can get 15% off. Just DM me inside Patreon and I'll get you the discount. Thank you, CrimeCon, for providing that discount to my viewers and patrons. A couple of you have reached out and told me you're going, so I can't wait to see you there. Okay, let's travel back in time to 1991. While I was spending my formative years out in sunny Northern California enjoying my friends and my nerdy hobbies, Joy and Charlie Hibbs were raising their 2 children in a place called Croydon, Pennsylvania. Croydon is part of Bristol Township, which is right in the greater Philadelphia area along the Delaware River that separates our great Commonwealth from the state of New Jersey. Just to give you an idea, from their house on Spencer Drive, the Hibbs were less than 20 miles away from Independence Hall. So pretty much right up the river to the northeast. Joy was described as an attractive, slender mother of 2 with a thick Southern accent, which had developed over the years she spent growing up in northern Florida. She was born in 1955 and attended Chiefland High School in Chiefland, Florida, about an hour outside of Gainesville. That's where she met Charlie. And the 2 were married on April 13th, 1974 in Ocala, Florida. From there, the couple moved around the country, living in a few different places before they settled down in a 1-story home at 1200 Spencer Drive. Joy was a gardener. She was known in the neighborhood as the person to share the vegetables she grew. And being from the South, she loved to fry all those vegetables. She'd fry everything from okra to chicken. And on the weekends, she and Charlie rode their motorcycles along the area's winding roads. They loved to shop at flea markets, and they often took their children, Angie and David, camping and fishing. Charlie Hibbs worked construction while Joy was a medical assistant at a practice in nearby Bensalem. Dr. Leon Catolico said in a report from years ago that when Joy came in to interview her, he hired her on the spot. He said that everybody in the office loved her, as did his patients. Besides all the things that Joy liked to do were all the things that just came with being a working wife and mom of two in 1990s America. I'm sure she did all of the kinds of things that many of us do. Grocery shopping, working and depositing those paychecks at the bank, filling up the car with gas, being a good neighbor, checking in on neighbors and attending parent-teacher conferences, stuff like that. In fact, as the days passed in April of 1991, she and Charlie celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary, and a few days later, she met with her son's elementary school teacher where she learned that David would be making the honor roll that term. The morning of April 19th began pretty much like any other morning. She cashed her check from Dr. Catolico's office and went to pick up some groceries. By 11 a.m., she was home. A neighbor spotted her walking her dog about then. And a little while later, two people from Bensalem Baptist Church stopped by the house for a visit. Joy had attended Easter services there about 3 weeks before at the invitation of a coworker at the medical office, and she was considering joining their congregation. Reverend Fourier Orlando, I'm probably not pronouncing the name properly, but the Reverend was one of those people, and he said they had a terrific conversation together that morning. He said Joy had even cried happy tears when she considered whether, if she were to die, foreshadowing here, would she go to heaven? She was confident that she was leading a good life and that she would. Reverend Orlando and his companion left at about 11:50 a.m. They were the last people to see Joy Hibbs alive. The afternoon of April 19th, 1991 was a warm one. It was still early in the afternoon when 12-year-old David walked home from school. He had received his report card, and he probably didn't know that his mom already knew that he was doing well. So he was excited to show her, and she was definitely going to be super happy at the results of all of his hard work at school. As he approached the house, he saw his mom's maroon Mercury Cougar sitting in the driveway. He passed it, and as he walked to the rear kitchen door, the door that he customarily used when he got home, as he opened the door, a billow of thick black smoke pushed him back. He could feel the heat, and he heard the roar of the flames inside. And he knew his mom was home because the car was in the driveway. He said later that he was desperate to get in there to help, but he just couldn't make it in. 12-year-old David screamed to a neighbor who was out tending his lawn, who came to help. David said that he was hysterical, and that he thought the neighbor grabbed him to stop him from going inside. Not sure who called 911 or who alerted the fire department, but it was only a few moments later that the fire department arrived, though to David it probably seemed like an eternity. As fire trucks and police cars descended on the house, David wanted desperately to find out if his mom was okay. But suddenly, somebody grabbed him and placed him in the back of an ambulance locking the door behind him. He said he banged on the door. He kept banging on it for someone to let him out. When it occurred to him, he looked back into the ambulance and saw that there was a paramedic in there with him. David said he told the paramedic he needed to see his mom, and the paramedic simply said, "Your mom is dead." It wasn't long before David's 16-year-old sister Angie arrived at the scene. A few minutes later, and Charlie was there. There wasn't anything either of them could do but watch firefighters work to put out the flames. That night, Charlie, Angie, and David stayed at Charlie's mom's house in Philadelphia. For all they knew that night, Joy had died due to the fire. They had learned that Joy's body was found in David's room, and naturally, he was guilt-stricken, wondering if maybe he'd left his computer on and it had started a fire. He imagined his mother had died trying to put it out. An autopsy performed the following day revealed that Joy Hibbs didn't die by fire or by smoke inhalation. There was no smoke in her lungs. She had, in fact, sustained other injuries that caused her to die before the house fire began. The examiner found that one of David's computer cords was wound tightly around his mother's neck. There were also 5 puncture wounds in Joy's body caused by an unknown tool. Joy's family didn't find out until the next day, so 2 days later, that their wife and mother wasn't a victim of an out-of-control accidental fire. Somebody had done this to her on purpose. The adults in David's life were probably trying to protect him when they decided not to tell him his mom's death wasn't an accident. But 6th graders are smarter than we sometimes realize. Within a week, David was back at school and was right in the thick of the rumor mill. And this is taking me back, guys, to when I was in 6th grade. I had a friend whose mom died. It was, for him, it wasn't unexpected. His mother had been ill for a long time, but I'm remembering just how tense things were in our classroom, especially for my friend. And I imagine that David felt the same kinds of feelings, right? And plus his classmates were probably feeling the same way. And in this, while it wasn't a little town, it was a little community, there was quite a rumor mill going. Kids were saying all sorts of things like, my friend's friend knows somebody at the fire department. He said that this happened, or so such and such happened, stuff like that. When he was interviewed by police asking him exactly what he saw that day, David told them that he noticed all 4 burners of the gas stove were on. He then found out that the police took the knobs to the stove to try to lift fingerprints. It wasn't hard for him to put 2 and 2 together. Others were starting to do the math too. Dr. Catolico, Joy's boss, had friends at the Bristol Township Police Department and was told that Joy's assailant may have been a man in the neighborhood who was known as, let's call him a purveyor of herbs. He was also a man that Joy Hibbs had reported to police, so it was possible, and many people in the community believed that she died because of some sort of retribution. The crime scene itself, of course, was a nightmare. The problem was that the entire scene was consumed in a house fire. If evidence wasn't burned in the fire, it was washed away by the water the fire department used to put it out. And they didn't know at the time, and they definitely had their priorities in the right place, but firefighters had unknowingly drenched and trampled all over the entire scene. Joy's body was not in a state that lent itself to the collection of very much evidence. All they knew is that she was lying on her back on the springs of David's bed, which was completely destroyed. All of her clothes were burnt off, but there was a snap from a pair of jeans that was still closed, meaning she had her clothes on when she died. As police continued their investigation, they were able to confirm a couple of things. That Joy had gone to the grocery store shopping. The remnants of the food she bought, along with a receipt, confirmed that. Neighbors saw her walking her dog. Police couldn't find any trouble in Charlie and Joy's marriage, and everyone at work and in the neighborhood liked her. Detective Lieutenant Richard Bilson, who led the initial investigation, said that he did as much background work on Joy Hibbs as he could and came to the conclusion that they were just an average family. He didn't believe Charlie had anything to do with it because he had a strong alibi. He was working at a construction site in Philadelphia. Plus, throughout the investigation, Bilson described him as being very cooperative. He even agreed to a polygraph test, which he passed. The only thing that stood out to police as they went further and further into their investigation was a blue late 1980s model Chevrolet Monte Carlo that was parked 3 feet from the curb near the Hibbs home at about the time the fire broke out, which was reported to police by a neighbor. The owner of the Monte Carlo was the man in the neighborhood that Dr. Catolico had found out about. It turned out that this guy knew Joy and Charlie Hibbs because they liked to indulge in small amounts of the herbs he marketed. I'm sure that news created quite a scandal in the neighborhood in 1991, though it wouldn't even cause a blip on anyone's radar today. In an effort to pin the crime on the owner of the Monte Carlo, Detective Bilson took the neighbor who reported the car over to the apartment building where this subject lived to see if she could spot the car. Bilson described his witness as, quote, pretty astute when it came to vehicles, close quote. He didn't point out the car, but his witness said, quote, if you're trying to get me to point out the Monte Carlo over there, that's not the car, close quote. Just in case his witness was mistaken, Bilson did some further investigation and found out that the owner of the Monte Carlo also had an alibi. He was staying in a motel with his family in the Poconos when Joy Hibbs died. He had a receipt to prove his whereabouts, and the employees of the motel backed up his alibi. Bilson asked the man if he'd submit to a polygraph test, which he refused. By the way, if I'm ever asked to take a polygraph test for any reason, I'm not doing it. No way, no how. I'm just not doing it. I personally don't think there's anything good that can come out of taking a polygraph. If you pass, they'll just think you're a really good liar. If you fail, you're immediately thought to be guilty. So I don't blame this guy for not submitting to the test. But I also admit it's suspicious that he didn't. A little foreshadowing here, though. For more than 3 decades after Joy Hibbs' death, this guy lived what appears to be a normal, everyday life. But we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Detective Bilson didn't have enough for a search warrant, even though he thought he probably had his guy. The witness said his blue Chevy Monte Carlo was absolutely not the car she saw parked 3 feet from the curb in front of the Hibbs home, and he had a solid alibi up at the motel in the Poconos. So over the years, the Hibbs family remained unsatisfied with the investigation into Joy's death. They stayed in contact with the Bristol Township Police, and they did their best to assist in the investigation in any way they could. But they were simultaneously heartbroken and angry. They had lost their wife and mother, and because of the fire and the subsequent water damage, they had lost almost all of their photographs and mementos. Very little of her remained. All that did remain were questions. For example, David Hibbs found out about a flannel shirt that was covered in blood that was recovered at the scene. Apparently, it had been tossed into a closet, and David knew it did not belong to his father. Had the police tested the shirt at all? Did the blood match with his mother's type, or did it belong to somebody else? As the years passed, the question turned to, was there any DNA that could be tested? Detective Bilson, when he was asked by a reporter from the Bucks County Courier-Times back in 2011, said he couldn't recall all of the evidence the police gathered, including whether or not there was a bloody shirt left behind or if stove knobs were collected for fingerprints. He did tell that reporter, though, that all of the evidence would have gone to the FBI to be tested. Bilson said he and his detectives did everything they could to crack the case, but just never could. This whole thing, by the way, is reminding me of a conversation I had with Kenny Clark several months ago. For those of you who are new to my channel, my friend Kenny is pretty impressive. He's a quadruple board certified pathologist. His name is Dr. Kenneth Clark, and he's certified in forensic pathology, neuropathology, anatomic pathology, and clinical pathology, if my memory serves. Anyway, Kenny once told me in a recorded interview that it's actually pretty easy to get away with murder. He said what he meant by that is that it's very difficult for investigators to assign it to someone without that someone making very simple mistakes. An example that jumps to mind right now to me is the Watts family case. In that case, and this is all just my opinion, the police knew they had their guy. They had video footage from the neighbor. They had Shanann's friend's testimony that things weren't going well in their marriage. And they had Chris Watts acting really, really weird. They had the girlfriend too, but to make their case, I think they really needed Chris to confess. And he agreed like an idiot to submit to a polygraph test. And once he did that, the police came in and told him that he had failed. The polygraph, by the way, was inadmissible in court, and they didn't even show him the results. They just told him that he'd failed and that he'd feel much better if he just got it off his chest. He then, again, like an idiot, and don't misunderstand me, I'm glad he did, but he confessed. Up until that moment, police didn't have a case that I think a prosecutor would pursue. And they may have been able to make their case eventually, but it was Chris Watts' confession that sealed the deal. Had he been able to hold out a little while longer, he just may have gotten away with it. The interview with Dr. Clark, by the way, can be seen in its entirety by my Patreon supporters. So if you'd like to see that interview, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Okay, getting back to Joy Hibbs' case. Police think they have their guy, but he has a solid alibi. They say they've done their best and that they'll never stop working to solve the case. Meanwhile, The Hibbs family, if David Hibbs' statement to the press is any indication, is not satisfied with the Bristol Township Police Department, what they've done to bring Joy's assailant to justice. David said, quote, "From that experience, I didn't get anything more than doubt about Bristol Township's ability to conduct an appropriate investigation. And it led me to believe that they do know who the killer is and that they did have enough, but this investigation was botched." Close quote. He continued on to say that he had had no choice but to find a way to cope with his mother's death. Quote, "You have this amazing ability to go on with your life and forget some of your past. But at the same time, you have this horrible guilt that this is someone who deserves not to be forgotten." Close quote. It's been 31 years since Joy Hibbs' brutal death. Detective Bilson is now 80 years old. He and his wife are living out their retirement in Florida, the same state that Joy Hibbs was born and raised in. It's pretty typical for retirees in the northeastern states to relocate to the South in their later years. Winters are harsh here in Pennsylvania, and old bones can really feel the cold. Bilson has now spent more time as a retiree than he ever did as a cop. But if you ask him, this is his case, the case that he never solved. And it doesn't happen every night, but often enough, he dreams about Joy Hibbs. All he could ever do after retiring just 3 years after Joy's death was to wait and hope that the case would be solved. He waited 3 decades. Then on the morning of May 26th, 2022, just a few days ago from when I'm recording this, Bilson picked up a phone call and heard the news from a Pennsylvania reporter that Robert Atkins had just been arrested for the murder of Joy Hibbs. The first time Bilson met Atkins was about a week after Joy Hibbs' death. Bilson visited the apartment where Atkins and his wife April lived. Atkins was wearing a white short-sleeved shirt, which gave Bilson the opportunity to casually look for any signs of a struggle. Bilson had no doubt that Joy Hibbs would have put up a fight. She was one of 8 siblings. She surely would have known how to scrap. But he didn't see any scratches on Atkins' arms. But something wasn't right. Atkins was his number one suspect right from the beginning. It had to be him. Charlie Hibbs had been transparent with Bilson. He answered every question, including if he and Joy used marijuana. Charlie answered that they did and even took him into the garage and showed him their stash. When asked where they got it from, Bilson heard the name Robert Atkins for the very first time. Now, 31 years later, Bilson thinks he remembers that Charlie told him that they owed Atkins some money and that there was some sort of disagreement between Joy and Atkins. Investigators now believe that disagreement was over a refund that Joy wanted from Atkins due to poor quality. Bilson doesn't remember those specifics. He also doesn't remember ever hearing anything about vandalism that occurred at the Hibbs home 2 months before the fire. According to allegations in the grand jury indictment, someone threw a brick at the Hibbs house, kicked in their back door, and flattened all 4 tires on Joy's Mercury Cougar. Had Bilson ever heard those allegations before? He said it would have been strong circumstantial evidence against Atkins, and he may have been able to get a search warrant with that information. Atkins wasn't cooperative the day Bilson visited with him and his wife in their apartment the week after the fire. Bilson told him they'd never have to talk to police again if he'd just take a polygraph. Again, he refused. April Atkins was there for the entire visit, but didn't say anything about the crime. Bilson suspected that she knew something about what happened to Joy Hibbs, but as long as they were married, it was unlikely that she would ever say anything. Years later, Bilson found out that the couple had divorced. He said he wished he was still on the force at that time. She had to know. She just wasn't opening her mouth. According to Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub, April Atkins was the missing piece of the puzzle all along.
I also have to give a lion's share of the credit to Sergeant Michael Slaughter of the Bristol Township Police Department, who breathed fresh life into this investigation. And that ball was then carried by Bucks County Detective David Hanks and Bucks County First Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Shorn, who, despite the passage of time and great odds, persisted, and through sheer force of will and the utilization of a very special tool, the power and the resources of the Bucks County Grand Jury were finally able to solve Joy Hibbs' murder. A little background on that. This case was submitted to the Bucks County Investigating Grand Jury as soon as one was impaneled this year, January of 2022. This grand jury heard from numerous witnesses, including the defendant's ex-wife, April Atkins. She told the grand jury, among other things, that in the early afternoon of April the 19th of 1991, the day of Joy Hibbs' murder, Robert Atkins came home covered in blood. She said Robert Atkins told her that he stabbed someone and lit their house on fire. She said that he put his bloody clothes in the wash and showered. He then told her to call out of work and gathered the kids because they were taking a trip to the Poconos. She didn't know if it was Joy who was killed until they got back from the Poconos 2 days after the murder. She had previously, on many other occasions, denied knowing anything about the murder because she feared for her own safety. She feared her husband, Robert Atkins, with good reason. After being presented with additional evidence corroborating April Atkins' critical testimony to them, the Bucks County Investigating Grand Jury concluded that Atkins, Robert Atkins, murdered Joy Hibbs on April 19, 1991, took the money from her, and intentionally set their family home on fire in an attempt to cover up her murder.
D.A. Weintraub mentioned Detective Slaughter, quote, breathing new life into the case. It appears to me this happened because on March 26, 2014, the Huffington Post ran a story about Joy Hibbs' case. I'm sure in a town like Croydon, this may have caused a bit of a stir, as can happen in many small communities. About 3 weeks later, on April 16, 2014, Detective Slaughter, who was the cold case detective assigned to the case, conducted what he described as a surprise interview with April Atkins. In that interview, she said it was the very first time police had talked to her about what happened to Joy Hibbs. And in that interview, she stated that her family went up to the Poconos on a weekend trip, that she didn't find out about Joy Hibbs until after they got back. 2 days later, Detective Slaughter interviewed Robert Atkins. During that interview, Atkins claimed that he was working as a confidential informant for the Bristol Township Police back in 1991 when this all happened. He admitted that he had a dispute with Joy Hibbs, but denied making any threats. He claimed once again that he was in the Poconos when Joy died. Slaughter was eventually able to confirm that Atkins had been a CI back in 1991. Okay, next, on May 28th, 2014, Detective Slaughter met with a former coworker of Joy Hibbs who worked for Dr. Catolico back in 1991. She told Slaughter that the Monday before the attack, an angry man called Joy Hibbs at work and threatened to kill her. This witness said she never told the police about this before because they appeared to be focused on Charlie Hibbs as a person of interest in the case, which I think is a pretty poor excuse for not giving that information. But okay, more than 2 years pass. These investigations, the time between blips in the timeline tends to be long, right? So another 2 years pass, and on September 11th, 2016, April Atkins full on just showed up at the Bristol Township Police Department to provide a recorded statement. In that statement, she said her then ex-husband, Robert Atkins, well, her then husband, but what am I trying to say? In 1991, husband, but in 2016, ex-husband, Robert Atkins came home the day Joy Hibbs was killed with blood all over his clothes. He told her what he did and then instructed her to pack up the kids and call out of work. She did as she was told, according to her statement, and learned of Joy's death after they got home. Now, this is where we get to the part where I became aware of the case. I noticed an article on people.com titled "Prosecutor Credits People Magazine Investigates for Arrest." That caught my eye because I love it when the work that citizen detectives do brings new life into a case. And remember, it seems to be the Huffington Post article, well, the Huffington Post article back in 2014 is what caused Detective Slaughter to do the surprise interview with April Atkins that ultimately led to her recorded statement in 2016. Well, 5 more years pass from the time that April Atkins gave her statement, and suddenly in November of 2021, there's more movement in the case. Just based on my experience, I think that's probably shortly after People Magazine Investigates started, poking around the case. Apparently at that time, detectives interviewed a former coworker of April Atkins, and her testimony became a critical part of the indictment. The following month, December 2021, communications between April and Robert Atkins were intercepted by Bucks County Detective David Hanks with the cooperation of April Atkins. I think that's probably cop talk for we had April Atkins record her phone conversation. Okay, in those communications that they intercepted, Robert was led to believe that the police showed up unannounced at April's home to interview her and her roommate about the Hibbs case. Robert was also led to believe that April had told her roommate about Robert's 1991 confession to her. Okay, 5 more months pass. On April 14th, 2022, Robert Atkins' youngest son testified that back in December, his father told him he was probably going to be arrested for something that happened a long time ago. That testimony, I'm sure, was given to the grand jury who handed down the indictment. Okay, then a little more than a month later, finally, on May 25th, 2022, Robert Atkins was arrested and charged with 11 counts of criminal conduct, which you can see in the criminal complaint here. Those counts, if you've never seen an indictment, what happens in the indictment process is the grand jury is presented with evidence and the prosecutor tells them these are the counts that we want to charge this person with. And then if the grand jury is convinced, the indictment has those counts listed. So these 11 counts came from the grand jury and are listed here on the criminal complaint. I guess I should probably say now, that Mr. Atkins is presumed by our legal system to be innocent until he's proven guilty. And that's not just an obligatory statement. That really is the way it works here. Police and the district attorney seem convinced that they have their man. They speak in very confident terms, but that shouldn't mean that we should assume that they're 100% correct in their investigation. I certainly hope they are, and am confident that a trial will show those facts. If it ever gets to trial, I think he'll likely plead out on this. So if it gets to trial, a jury will have to determine his guilt. For now, though, it seems that Joy's family is optimistic about Robert Atkins' arrest. They have not spoken publicly, at least up until the point that I recorded this video, but they did release a statement, and that statement reads, quote, "Joy Hibbs was a sweet, charming Southern girl from Central Florida, a loving and devoted mother, wife, and medical assistant. She was highly regarded and loved by her friends, neighbors, and co-workers alike. On April 19th, 1991, she was brutally murdered in her own home in broad daylight. 5 times in the chest and neck and with an electrical cord. Her body and our family home were intentionally set on fire in an attempt to make this horrific crime disappear. The immense grief and suffering our family has endured over the last 3 decades will never disappear. For 31 years, our family has been haunted by this tragic loss, knowing without a doubt that Robert Atkins was the perpetrator. Our family has waited 31 years for justice to prevail. We would like to thank District Attorney Matt Weintraub and Chief Deputy DA Jennifer Scorn, hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Detective David Hanks for pursuing this case. We especially want to thank Detective Michael Slaughter of the Bristol Township Police Department for his tireless effort in investigating this case and seeking justice for our family. We are grateful for the outpouring of love and support from the community and ask that you respect our privacy during this difficult time." Close quote. So it appears the Hibbs family, along with retired Detective Bilson, had no doubt as to who the perpetrator was. They had to live knowing, 1, that they knew who did it, and 2, they know they couldn't do anything about it for 3 decades. But now it seems to me that justice is about to be delivered to Charlie, Angie, and David Hibbs. I've said before that I don't think this will bring any closure to them, because how do you close wounds like these? But if it brings them some measure of peace, I'm happy for that. I often think about why we as a society have deemed it so important for us to continue to work to solve crimes that occurred decades in the past. I know why it's important to me, but I become more hopeful, I guess, in humanity when I stop to think and realize that it's important to all of us. I don't know. It just gives me more hope. It's really easy to look around and see members of the human race doing all sorts of vile and evil things. But when we recognize that those who are doing it are in a super minority, the vast majority, no matter your background, culture, country, religious beliefs, or no religious beliefs, color, gender, sexual orientation, etc., there are good people looking for the right balance of justice and mercy. It reminds me of a conversation I had on this channel with my friend Matt, and this is the second time I'm doing this on this video, so if you don't know who Matt is, he's Dr. Gruwell and is a professor of genetics and genomics at Penn State. He's been in a few of my videos. Anyway, I'm reminded of what Matt has been what he said speaking about genetics, and I'm not going to get this perfectly right, but he said something like 99.9% of all humans on Earth share the exact same genetic code. It's just 0.1% that makes each one of us individual. And I think about that pretty frequently. Back in California, where I grew up, my dad served as the volunteer president of the Interfaith Council for several years, probably close to a decade. In fact, he actually was recently honored by that same Interfaith Council for the work he's done over a lifetime to bring people together in a world where we're often torn apart by society into different camps or tribes. One of the things that my dad likes to say is that we're all children of God trying to get back to his presence. We're just finding different doors. And I don't want to wax religious on this because I respect and love all people of all faith traditions and people without faith or a faith tradition. But this idea that we care about the Joy Hibbs of the world and that we want some measure of justice for the unjust way that her life was ended, it's unifying to me and makes me feel like everything is going to be okay. When I die, hopefully from old age, the world I leave is going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Yeah, I think I probably waxed a little too deep there. But anyway, before I wrap this video up, I want to let you know that my schedule for releasing videos is going to be interrupted over the next week or two as I get ready to go to CrimeCon. As I said in the beginning of this video, I'm looking into a case that will probably end up being multiple videos. It's the case of David Scott Elmquist. This is a case that's gotten a little bit of attention here on YouTube already, but I've been working behind the scenes to get all of the investigation files that are public record. Not only police reports and fire marshal reports, but I also have some audio recordings of interviews that the police and the fire marshal held with the victim's wife. And not to give too much of a teaser, but this is a case in which investigators came to the conclusion that the victim was not a victim of foul play, but that what caused his death was done per se, which is a fancy Latin phrase meaning to oneself. I'm not buying it, at all. So after a couple of weeks of looking into cases that have been solved, we're pivoting back to a case like Ellen Greenberg, Amanda Winkowski, Rochelle Brinson, Father Joe Moreno. Isn't technically a case at all, except that it really is. And with that, I'm not going to bid you adieu. Instead, I'll say until next time, take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to my channel. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below.